Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome back to Random Fandom, where we just take some things that I'm a huge fan of, and maybe some of you guys are too, and just talk about them. Sometimes, in the case of this one and previous one, with some people who don't really know much about the setting offhand. So today's topic is my favorite sci-fi setting of all time, my favorite games that I've ever played. I've been a fan since I saw the admittedly pretty terrible cartoon back in 1993. We are talking about Battletech. And here to help me do that, we have, friend of the channel and frequent guest, Fizz Choza. How's it going, man?
Hi everybody. I know literally nothing about Battletech at all. I know the name because on old emulator website I saw there were old Battletech games, but I never played them. I know literally nothing about the franchise or Mech
Okay.
Warrior. I knew a little about Warhammer 40K due to pop culture as monsters like Space Marines. Everyone knows Space Marines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, they're hard to miss.
Yeah, true. The Space Marines are kind of hard to miss.
Yeah.
And orcs. Everyone knows the orc 40K orcs are very comedically weird.
Mm-hmm.
And joining us for the first time on the channel, I think, but you and me have been friends for quite a while, is Commander Phil. How's it going, dude?
Hey, not bad. You kind of you've told me a little bit about this universe, but other than that, I don't know a whole lot. So
there is so much to go into. Like, I'm just going to go into 3025 here and maybe a little bit of the Star League era stuff to kind of give you a where it all came from kind of perspective.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
But we're barely scratching the surface today, so this will be interesting. So we're gonna, I'll give you some background on the series, and then we'll go into the different, great major powers at play in the Inner Sphere, which is the map you see right here. This is the Inner Sphere, basically all of human explored territory. Because unlike most sci-fi settings, there are no aliens, except for that one book we don't talk about and never happened.
Okay.
And Bush, we will get back to 40K at some point, but I like changing it up.
One thing I want to, the first thing, can I ask my first question?
Sure, go ahead.
Are there any sentient robots in the setting?
No, AI is not really a thing here. I mean, you have some pretty advanced computers, like especially during the Star League era, but in most places in the Inner Sphere in 3025, in terms of technology, they're not that much more advanced than we are. And in some places in the periphery, they're actually not as advanced as we are.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, the periphery has always been, the periphery is like, these territories out on the edges here.
Right. Okay.
Of like basically little pirate kingdoms, some larger periphery nations that just kind of try to go unnoticed by the rest of the Inner Sphere and try to stay out of the power struggles that are constantly going on. Places like the Torian Concordat, the Outworlds Alliance, all those kind of places. They're just kind of were like, look, we came out here because we wanted nothing to do with the rest of you. Now fuck off and leave me alone. And in the case of the Torian Concordat, hippity hoppity, get off my property and back it up with nuclear weapons.
It's kind of like the Outer Rim in Star Wars, or
yeah, basically.
Okay, right.
So
like the land that civilization forgot.
Yeah.
So this saying is just humans and nothing else.
Yes.
There's no genetically modified monsters, or no.
Well, I mean, Canopus probably has something like that, but it's probably more of a hooker than anything else. But yeah, the whole thing with Battletech is it's mostly like kind of court politics and power struggles between the great houses. It's in terms of references to other stuff or like similarities to other stuff. It's more like Game of Thrones in that aspect.
Yeah, I was just thinking like Game of Thrones and Star Trek kind of.
Yeah, it's constant political backstabbing. It's very Machiavellian.
Okay, cool.
It's especially if you get into like the early succession wars, like right after the fall of the Star League, war crimes were basically the order of the day.
Mm.
Entire inhabited worlds were essentially bombed into non-habitability.
Okay.
Like and even during the American Civil War, which was the fall of the Star League, I mean, entire planets were just laid waste to, and were either no longer functional as a habitable world, or straight up the entire population was eradicated. Because especially back in the old days, they had warships, and ground invasions are nice and all, but if you can just nuke them from orbit, why wouldn't you?
I keep wanting to make like an Exterminatus joke, but I know it's not the same franchise.
not the same franchise, but similar idea.
Oh yeah.
Oh look, they have an army. That's cute. Delete.
Yeah.
Because no one argues with smoking craters.
No, exactly.
And, if you guys want to learn a lot more about this setting, I would heavily recommend the Black Pants Legion and Text Talks Battletech.
Mm-hmm.
The man is great. He does a lot of really in-depth videos on some of the topics that he chooses to cover, and does a really good job researching and narrating all of it in a way that's entertaining. And he has some stuff in there that's legit hilarious. But yeah, in 3025, we have just finished the third succession war and are about to go into number 4. And these aren't like wars like we'd think of them, like World War II, where it was very fast, hard, and extremely brutal. These are more slow-burning, centuries-long conflicts that are
Like
very
medieval
limited in
war.
scale. Like, it's almost like a series of border raids more than it is
That's
anything.
like medieval war.
Yes, it's much more medieval in that you're likely to take a couple of planets here and there and probably lose one or two on the other end than anybody will ever actually gain a true upper hand.
Okay.
Except in the case of the Fourth Succession War, where you see this little green place down here. Most of that stuff up by Terra. Like, if you guys are wondering where Earth is, it's right in the middle of it. If you guys see that white dot in the middle of the map, that's Terra.
Yeah. So I'm kind of picturing
all the stuff up by Earth Terra gets gobbled up by the Federated Suns, which is the yellow spot next to them.
Okay.
Yeah, and it happens in like 3 years.
I'm kind of picturing like space trench warfare almost. It's just like you gain a bit and then you lose a bit. Yeah.
But it's more like medieval warfare where you have units like stationed along the border, and occasionally somebody, even if they don't have a larger objective, will just conduct a raid into enemy territory just to fuck them over.
Okay.
And the technology base has actually regressed quite a bit since the 2780s when the Star League fell, because the first and second succession wars, a lot of the initial conflict between the great houses, well, a lot of it was centered around a lot of that high-tech production facilities and logistical hubs. So if your enemy has a factory that can produce this very advanced type of battle mech, or ferrofibrous armor or something like that, you would, even if you can't take the planet, you would destroy it to keep your enemy from being able to use it. And if you are able to take the planet, there's a very good chance that they're going to destroy it on their way out, just so you don't have it.
Yeah.
Rinse and repeat over hundreds of planets for over 300 years. And a lot of technology basically no longer exists in the inner sphere because no one understands how to make it or repair it. With one very notable exception that we'll get to in the end. Get your tinfoil hats ready, boys.
Oh, they're always ready.
But I mean, to get into the great houses themselves, first of all, we're starting here and working our way kind of counterclockwise around the inner sphere, just because that's the order I put them in. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. We're going to start with the faction I usually play as and support is the Federated Suns under House Davion. These guys are essentially the good guys of the setting. They're they're the faction that goes out of their way not to be a dick most of the time.
Well, what's the name of the faction again?
House Davion, the Federated Sons.
Davion. Okay, Davion. Yeah.
If you need a reference, it's on the wall right behind me.
Yep.
Yeah, the Federated Sons are a monarchy, but they're more of a British style monarchy where they still have a constitution essentially, and civil liberties and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
Which makes them pretty unique for this setting, in that they don't treat their people like absolute trash. Which less so with a couple of others, but some of them. Looking at you, House Liao, we'll get to you. But yeah, the Federated Sons are one of the most stable kingdom or stable successor states. They don't go out of their way to be a dick to anybody, really, except House Liao and House Karita, who are their two neighbors.
Wait, House Korea.
Yes, House Karita, otherwise known as
Karita.
the Draconis Combine. We'll get to them next. Essentially, Space Japan.
Oh.
And I'm not kidding. Like, they straight up have mechs that are designed like samurai.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Like, they take weeb to a whole new level. And one of the cool parts about Battletech as a setting is that all the successor states have like different cultures, but it's not really dependent on ethnicity. Like, there's a character in Wolves on the Border, one of the best Battletech novels that's ever existed. You have one of the main characters, Minobu Tetsuhara, who you would think he's Japanese. He is, in fact, black. Very black. Like, I've seen artist renderings of him, and I don't know if you guys remember the show Afro Samurai.
Vaguely, yeah.
That's kind of what he looks like.
Okay, yeah.
So, like, it's very interesting. Like, you'll see, like, very, very different ethnic groups all behaving like a very specific culture, and it's kind of an interesting thing. But the Fed Sons or their military, especially the AFFS, the Armed Forces of the Federated Sons, is the most highly organized military in the Inner Sphere and one of the best supplied. And they are very focused on tactics and kind of using the right tool for the right job. So they're a much more effective military than most, even though they're not the largest. And right about this time, they are actually in the middle of forming an alliance with another successor state, the Lyran Commonwealth, who is the largest military and industrial base in the entire Inner Sphere. And they're pretty much poised to, once that happens in 3030, they're basically poised to just kick the shit out of the rest of the great houses. Because when you combine House Steiner's industrial might and just sheer amount of mechs they can produce with the AFFS military's organization and logistics system, they're terrifying. It's basically the next iteration of the Starleague Defense Force.
Okay, what's Davion known for outside being the quote unquote good faction?
Well, they're known for usually being pretty even keeled. And even if you're not on their side, technically, they won't go out of their way to be a dick to you unless, like, especially I usually play as a merc. So they don't take contracts taken against them too personally, usually. Like, they realize business is business and you got paid to take a contract against them. You could just as easily be on their payroll next week. So, like, they take a very philosophical approach to it of, it's nothing personal, it's just business. The next group on our list, pretty much the polar opposite. We're talking House Karita, the Draconis Combine. One of the larger successor states, and certainly one of the most aggressive. These guys are constantly launching border raids into both Davion and Steiner space to try to see what they can take. And when it comes to their own citizens, well, pretty much picture feudal Japan. where you have the warrior class, the samurai of the DCMS or their military, and then you have the nobodies under that. And if you say one word wrong, you could quite literally meet your end at the end of a sword, and it's perfectly legal. When it comes to their dealings with mercs, well, for a while after the whole Wolf's Dragoons incident, which we'll get to in a future video probably, they have a death to all mercenaries policy.
Oh.
So, yeah, if you're a merc, you really don't want to get caught by these guys. Because,
like the comparison from earlier about like Game of Thrones and stuff, I'm getting a lot of like Targaryen vibes from the picture itself, but I'm assuming they're not much like them.
No, well, it depends on what era we're talking.
Okay.
The coordinator, which is the head of the Draconis Combine, it really kind of depends on how batshit crazy he is.
Right.
And that varies quite a bit throughout the years. If you're talking Takashi Kurita in like the early 3000s, yeah, he's pretty bad. It's not that he's insane, he's just brutal as fuck. When his son Theodore takes over, you see a little bit of a relaxation of that and more, sane governance and a more pragmatic view towards the rest of the inner sphere. Because the way the Combine looks at a lot of places in the inner sphere is Kuritan territory that we haven't conquered yet. They basically have this manifest destiny attitude of it's ours, you just don't know that yet.
Okay.
Which makes them very, very dangerous to deal with. And they're also quite good because they're at war constantly. Their mech warriors are some of the best in the entire business. And for those of you who don't know what a battle mech is, well, I have a bunch right here that I painted. So things like that. Basically giant stompy robots with a human pilot and a bunch of big goddamn guns on them, as God intended. So their mech warriors are pretty good. They have a tendency towards the same as the Imperial Japanese did, towards mindlessly charging into their opponent to fight at close range, which sometimes works and sometimes gets them killed. And it kind of happens in equal measure. And it's really a matter of, do you have enough firepower to put them down before they can get into melee range? And if the answer is no, then you should be backing off, because once they get into melee range, they're incredibly dangerous.
Oh, so the House Kurita's mechs don't have ranged weapons on them, or?
Oh no, they do. They do. They just prefer to fight in close at melee range.
So so the mechs have really good swords on them, right?
Sometimes yes. Most of the time, it's just fisticuffs. One mech beating another one to death with giant meaty fists. Which leads to some hilarious moments, especially on tabletop, where I've killed mechs by punching them directly in the cockpit.
Wow.
That's
smash the
driver. The way you want to go.
That's kind of
don't attack the driver.
Well, there's actually a phrase that mercs use all the time in this setting: "Kill the meat, save the metal." We can get mech warriors are a dime a dozen. Mechs are expensive.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of battle mechs. I mean, some of them are so rare, like the King Crab. I can show you a picture model of it. Things like the King Crab are so rare that by the time of 3025, all of their production lines were destroyed during the First Succession War. So there are only a couple dozen of them in the entire inner sphere at this point that we know of, because Comstar has a bunch, but we'll get to those guys later. But there are entire mech designs that have gone out of production in the centuries since the fall of the Star League. Some of it due to obsolescence, the design doesn't really do it anymore. Like there's something better out there. And in a lot of cases, it's because the technology to produce that thing is now lost and we can't make them. And in the case of some designs, the more advanced technology like endosteel construction or ferrofibrous armor was what made that thing work.
I want to ask you about space travel in this universe. They have spaceships, but are they mass manufactured, or do they have to constantly repair old ones?
Currently, it's a little bit of both. There are automated factories that are still left over from the Star League era that can produce jump ships. So you have two types of ships that are commonly used for travel in the Unisphere, or in this setting. You have jump ships, which kind of look like this. Which are basically just it's essentially an FTL drive with a couple of docking ports and enough, storage and hydroponics bays to keep the crew alive.
Yeah, you told me about you told me before off screen. You talked about the jump ships with teleportation device.
Yes, the Kearney Fuchida drive. Basically, I'm not even sure how it works entirely. It's kind of like quantum entanglement, where basically through a lot of very complex math, you can there's 2 points at each star system, the zenith and nadir point of the star, right at the edge of their gravity well, that are used as jump points for every system.
By the way, it's funny. It's funny that I thought that separately. Like I thought that, but separately from my own comic universe. It's funny. That's a coincidence.
Yeah, and basically, in order to travel around in the inner sphere, you'll jump into one of the zenith or the nadir point, or if you're very desperate and or stupid, one of the pirate points that's far closer in, because they're a lot harder to compute and things can go wrong. Up to and including your ship kind of sort of retranslates inside of something. Which ends about as well as you'd think.
Okay.
Oh, damn. Yeah, ship destroyed.
Yeah, pretty much. And these things are so difficult to make, like to the point where nobody even knows how KF drives work anymore. Nobody in the Unisphere anyway. There's other factions that do, but so even amongst all the destruction and mayhem and war crimes, no one shoots at jump ships, because everybody realizes that if the jump ships go away, well, all interstellar trade and commerce stops.
Yep.
And everybody's kind of back to, pre-space flight levels of tech wherever they happen to end up.
So it's just a
lot of these colonies depend on imports of certain goods from outside to keep going. Because a lot of planets aren't good for everything. Like, farm worlds aren't everywhere. And, a small population can probably survive on them, but not anything approaching like a civilization.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you have these guys, the dropship, which are basically, they attach to jump ships for their ride through FTL. And then once they get where they're going, they'll detach from the jump ship, which stays out at the jump point. And these things will go into the actual worlds. So usually what you'll have is like, and that's how everything gets where it's going, from cargo to passengers to mech units, all that kind of stuff. So you'll have, and basically the jump ship will be there recharging the whole time, if not continuing on its circuit, because they have kind of a trade route essentially that they keep plying. And it takes about 7 days for a KF drive to recharge based on the size of the star. So you have so even a relatively short journey can take quite a while, because you're spending a week recharging every time. And you can set up, these are extremely expensive and usually only used for extreme priority parties and missions. What they call a command circuit, where when you jump into one system, there'll already be a charged jump ship waiting there. So you basically just transfer over to the next jump ship, jump to the next system, repeat, almost like the Pony Express.
Okay.
And you can get where you're going very quickly that way. But for the average, or for a normal time, going from one end of the inner sphere to another can take you over a year. And in the case of most mercenary units, you don't have that much money in storage. So you basically kind of murder hobo your way around the inner sphere, taking contracts where you can with just about anybody who'll pay you. I tend to like working for House Davion because they pay well and they're not likely to shoot you in the back for no reason. Unlike some other factions out there, looking at you, House Karita. But it'll take you longer to get where you're going, but you can make money along the way.
You also heard about drop ships, you said?
Yeah, a dropship is basically how goods get to and from the jump point.
The dropship designed to land on a planet.
Yes, the dropship is designed to land on planets and sometimes do aerial drops of mechs. If they can't land in a specific zone or the landing zone may be under fire, they'll use smaller, because there's different sizes of dropships. So you have the Leopard, which is what you see in MechWarrior 5 and Battletech, which can only carry 4 mechs and 2 aerospace fighters. But they're very fast and very hard to hit. So that's what you'll use for like hot insertions. Almost picture like the space version of a Huey from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where you'll basically fly in real fast, drop 4 mechs off to secure a drop zone for a much larger dropship, usually carrying the main force of your unit. Unless you only have 4 mechs, in which case, well, that's it.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah.
You just drop your kids off at the war zone, and they're like, "Here you go. I'll be back later."
Yeah, so like, in good scenarios, like they'd be dropping off like recon mechs or something to.
Yeah, it would basically. Yeah. Well, actually, it's kind of counterintuitive. The way I plan Pathfinder drops like that, which is what I call them.
Okay.
I would go with heavies.
Okay.
Because you want something that's still fairly quick.
Yeah.
But also has enough armor to hang in there for a minute and enough firepower that if you do run into serious resistance, they can still overcome it.
Okay.
Whereas a light lance, if you meet any serious resistance, they're just going to have to run for it.
Yeah.
Because they can't deal with that much firepower.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you look at some of the lighter stuff like a Locust, which it's a 20-ton mech, and it's essentially a couple of machine guns, a cockpit, a medium laser, and a death wish. The only advantage they have is that they're really fast.
Yeah.
So they basically just run screaming through the battlefield and try to just survive and collect as much data as they can. And, that works sometimes. And sometimes it doesn't. And then you need a new pilot. And possibly a new mech, because that's things probably destroyed. And that's actually how you get most of your mechs if you play the games either tabletop or on PC. You get most of your mechs from Battlefield Salvage, where basically after the battle, your little merry bunch of engineers go out and scavenge whatever they think they can fix. And a lot of these mechs that you're dealing with are hundreds of years old. Like in the case of some designs, they haven't been produced in 200 years.
Wow. Okay.
So
how
getting blown up and rebuilt.
How advanced is regular weaponry?
You have 3 main types of weapons. You have autocannons and like ballistic weaponry, which includes Gauss rifles. Although in 3025, Gauss weaponry is extremely rare. It would be considered lost tech. You have missiles, whether it be the long-range LRM or the short-range SRM variety. And then you have the energy weapons, mostly lasers and PPCs.
I guess these weapons are rare, right?
What's that?
I guess the energy weapons are rare, right? Since
they're actually pretty common.
Wait. How come they have more energy weapons than Gauss rifles?
Well, because Gauss rifles are a lot more advanced in construction. Whereas lasers and stuff like that are much simpler or easy to produce.
Yeah, it's not how it is in real life.
No, it isn't, but that's the excuse they use in universe. And keep in mind, this setting was written in the 80s, so they were both theoretical at the time.
That's backwards. Like, it's actually easier to make gauss rifles than lasers.
We know that now, but they wouldn't have. Hey, Ian Soforth, how's it going, man? Good to see you here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but no, they, and basically the main limiting factor on what you can on your weaponry is your heat buildup, which is one of the main drawbacks of the post Star League era. Is they used to have double strength heat sinks that would work twice as efficiently for the same tonnage. Except those are gone now. They're very rare. They're very hard to come by. So the standard heat sinks, like they'll get the job done mostly, but especially on tabletop, you have to very carefully manage your heat. Because if you overheat and shut down, well, you could be sitting there completely immobile in the middle of a battlefield.
Yeah,
that's not a good thing.
Nope.
Are there devices to mitigate that? Like, are there devices that transfer the heat to somewhere else?
Well,
like,
you just have to build more heat, get more heat sinks, which means sacrificing armor or maybe a weapon or two,
or maybe transfer the heat to offensive flamethrower.
Well, there are mechs that have flamers, but they're more standard flamethrowers than anything else.
Like, imagine how useful it would be to transfer the heat to a thermal reactor or something.
Well, you could. Well, the thing is, and this is actually a really cool gameplay mechanic in a lot of different games, is how much heat sinking capacity you have is a baseline, basically, like under like Earth normal conditions, it'll sink like say 18 heat per round, which is determined by your number of heat sinks. A single strength heat sink will sink 1 heat per round, per sink. So that being said, you have environments like deserts where it's a hotter environment, so you start off with a little bit of a heat load. And then my favorite is, because it's kind of counterintuitive until you think about it, is vacuum. Like, fighting on an asteroid or a large moon or something like that.
Space. Yeah.
Because you start off very cold, but you sink heat very slowly because there's nowhere for it to go. So you will lose heat, but very, very slowly. So you have to be very careful how high you let your heat build, because you'll either shut down or you can override the shutdown. But if you don't bleed off enough heat before you fire again, on all energy builds, it's not a bad strategy, because you don't have any ammo. But if you do have any ammunition based weapon in your mech, you have to roll every turn. You have to roll dice to see if you go boom or not. Yeah, it's not great. Overheating or being right at your heat limit is not a great place to be, especially if you're in the middle of a fight. Like, if you've just ended it, that's fine. But if you still got another couple of mechs out there and you're running against the red line, so that's one of those, I have to back off for a turn or so and let my mech cool.
Yeah, so they're a bit like death saves or something in D&D.
Yeah, or do what Commander Phil does in World of Warships, say honk honk ramming speed, and then just go bash it in the face, because using your melee melee ability builds no heat. It's a good way to dump heat for a round.
Wait, this would be useful. Imagine if the heat sink actually was in the fist.
That would be funny, but they tend to put them on the internal structure of the mech to kind of sink heat away from the actual structure.
But imagine the heat sink. Imagine the heat sink with
lasers and stuff, and they do build a lot of heat. And jet fuel may not be able to melt steel beams, but a laser can.
Oh no!
I know, but imagine the heat sink was in the fist, and then when it overheats, you actually punch with super hot punch.
Yeah, well, like a burning punch or whatever would be an interesting one, and there's probably a custom build that you can do that with it. And that's kind of the cool thing with mech customization. Like, as long as it fits in the tonnage, and your DM allows you to do it, you can go for it. Like, as long as you can write up rules that make sense for it. And your DM will probably be like, "Fuck it, that's awesome. Let's do this thing."
Yeah.
Because I would do that if I was playing the Mech Warrior Battletech game, I would do that.
I mean, the PC games you can't do it because obviously you have specific rules that you're playing by. But for a tabletop game, if you can write it, you can do it. But moving on to the next big house, this is the Lyran Commonwealth, otherwise known as House Steiner or Space Germany.
Okay, yeah.
But the fun Germans, not the mid-century ones.
Yeah.
Basically, they're extremely wealthy due to their massive industry. They're actually pretty easy to deal with. They're a monarchy, but the Archon, who's the head of the Commonwealth, is usually pretty good. They're usually pretty well liked, with some notable exceptions. But they're usually pretty focused on making sure that their lower nobles and commoners are treated pretty well and have everything they need, which is kind of unique for a group of people that, or someone who can blow up a planet by accident. It's like, oh, did I say that one? Oh, yeah, I that's the wrong planet. But no, these guys are really good at industry, and they have a tendency, because of this, to use mechs that are stupidly large for the task at hand. Like, there's the one of the most famous Battletech memes of all time, the Steiner Scout Lance, which is 400 tonners. So, which are the largest mechs in the game. So 4 Atlases would be their recon.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, it makes sense at a certain point. If you have 400 tons of battle mech on the field, do you really care what they have?
Yeah.
And they're kind of Russian in that aspect, where they just steamroll people. And also their generals tend to be fairly incompetent and are more willing to throw mechs and equipment at the problem until it just goes away than they are to actually finding a strategic or tactical solution to the problem.
Okay.
It's not that they're stupid. It's just that they have the resources and they're, really willing to use it. So
I was going to say too, like, from the heraldry of the flag itself, like, it is a lot of like Norse Germanic looking things.
There's a bit of that because there is a nation that won't exist in 3025, but will come into existence in the 3030s. That's kind of a V-shaped wedge in between House Carita and House Steiner. Let me flip back to the Intersphere map here for a second. You see that where the Steiner-Carita border is? And in between the Rasselhag district and the Tamar Pact? That will become known as the Free Republic, which is Ikea in Spain, essentially. I mean, Scandinavia. So they will exist, but they're part of the respective territories right now. Because they did exist early on in the Age of War, which is something we're not going to go into today. It's really long and complicated, and Sven Vanderplank has a great series on the Age of War. You guys should go check out. It's kind of dry, but he does his best to spice up the narrative and stuff like that. And it's a really interesting period of war because for most of that age, battle mechs don't exist yet. So it's standard armies going toe to toe and warships bombing things from orbit.
Okay. Wait. Are they transport mechs?
They're not transport necessarily, but they are. Battle mechs are actually an offshoot of industrial mechs. So like loggers, construction droids, stuff like that.
Oh,
like basically, and there are rules in the game of, if you're out on the ass end of nowhere, like the periphery, a lot of the battle mechs they have will be like a logger mech with a bunch of machine guns pointed at it, put on it.
Oh,
the periphery gets into some real redneck engineering sometimes.
Well, what's the faction name again? The faction I'm talking about, Signer.
These guys are the Lyran Commonwealth.
Oh, Liren.
Yep, or Lyran if you're,
No,
mispronouncing it.
Lyren. No.
Yeah. I say Lyran because it's like the Constitution Lyra because that's where it is, or a constellation. So yeah, these guys pretty good, especially if you're a merc because they pay really well because they have money to burn. Just don't expect any competent help from their military because the LCAF is
Really got money and that's it.
yeah, they got money and a lot and equipment. So if you need mechs or you want to get some good toys, these guys are the ones to talk to.
Yeah.
And then they're very large. I think they're one of, if not the largest successor state in terms of territory. And they're combined, and like I said, as of 3030, they combined with the Federated Commonwealth, or with the Federated Suns to form what we call the FedCom, or Federated Commonwealth. And that'll exist until the 3060s. And yeah, they're just as terrifying as they appear because you have the most effective military in the AFFS and the best supplied and biggest industrial base in the LCAF combined to form the AFFC. And they're both really, really well supplied and really well led. And also they are extremely large. So it's kind of like the US is now, where it's just like, oh, good. So they have both advantages. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, so they're better equipped than us, and there's more of them. Great. And like I said, for the most part, these guys tend to mind their own business, with the possible exception of the next guys we're going to talk about, House Merrick. And again, that's more just border friction than it is an actual hatred of each other. Unlike, a lot of other relationships between the inner sphere, like House Liao and just about everyone, or House Davion, and surprisingly the Taurian Concordat, where for a little periphery state, they're like extremely paranoid that Davion is just going to come and invade them at some point.
Wait. What's star right now? Which one?
The Taurian Concordat is a small periphery state next to the Federated Suns.
Taurium?
Yeah, Taurian.
Okay, Taurian. No, Taurian.
Called that because their homeworld is in the constellation Taurus.
Oh, they named constellations. The guy.
Somewhat like I don't know if you know how like the coordinate system works in space, where like it'll appear like it's in that or towards the Taurus constellation from Earth.
Yeah, of course.
So that's kind of how it goes. Like I don't think their planets are actually in the Taurus constellation, but it's in that direction. So, it's not a precise system, but it works. And the map of the inner sphere, like, it's really hard to get a good map of it because you're trying to do a 2D representation of a 3D object.
Yeah.
That's hundreds of light years long. So it's one of those, like, we do the best we can.
Maybe a computer could do a better map, although the technology in that was actually worse than ours, but seemed like.
I mean, in certain ways it's better, and in certain ways it's kind of equivalent. Like, they have like hollow projectors and stuff like that, but
nobody knows how to make any of this stuff. You just use old stuff.
Well, in a lot of cases, yes. So, like, even if it still works, they couldn't build another one, but they can maintain it well enough to keep it running. So it's almost like the Mechanicus in 40K, where they may not know how to build a new one, but they can keep the old one running pretty good.
Okay.
They at least understand it well enough to do that.
Yeah, I keep thinking like Warhammer references, but I'm trying to just like learn new information.
Well, they also came out with the first iteration of Battletech, which is TRO 3025. At about the same time, 40K Games Workshop was introducing Rogue Trader.
Okay,
which is the game that would go on to become Warhammer 40K. So, you'll see a lot of the same concepts. You'll see a lot of Dune references in both, especially with the next house we're going to talk about, which is House Merrick, otherwise known as the Free Worlds League.
Okay, wow.
And yes, that is House Atreides' emblem. And yes, their homeworld is Atreus.
Okay, I am getting like some Starship Troopers vibes from that.
This is more Dune.
Okay.
Like their homeworld is Atreus, named after House Atreides.
Right. Okay.
And even when it comes to how the jump ships work and stuff, it's much more like the Guild Highliners in Dune than it is, Star Trek. Because transport happens instantly.
Okay. Wow.
It's basically like, I'm here, and one flash of light later, I'm 30 light years away.
I know, it's teleportation, it's not travel, per se.
Well, it is travel in that you're just kind of instantly transporting from one place to the other. It works a lot more like Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, it's teleportation. Yeah, it's not.
Essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But House Merrick is a very interesting one because they're actually very well run for the most part. And they're one of the only ones that's not technically a hereditary monarchy. It functionally is, but it's actually sort of like old school like the Netherlands used to be. Back when they were the United Provinces, where they're technically a republic. And the House Merrick is what they call the captain. He's not, the king or whatever. He's the captain general, where basically he's in charge of defense. And it's less so like he's like he functionally runs everything, and he really courts this power. It's more nobody else wants to deal with it, so they just leave it on Merrick's doorstep like a bag of flaming dog poo. And that's kind of how it goes from there. And House Merrick struggles more with internal problems constantly than they do external ones. Like, one of the greatest quotes about them at all time is, "There is no threat to Merrick except another Merrick, but glory to Merrick." They fight internally all the time. There's like constant civil wars of like one branch of House Merrick trying to take power from the other ones, or some other family trying to knock Merrick off the top spot. They're constantly at war inside each other, and that continues right up until somebody else tries to take advantage of it and try to clip territory off of them. In which case they turn into like the Greek states from their classic period of, "Hey, you can't do that to him. Only I can."
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's like, wow. I know we were at war a minute ago, but let's band together and go kick this guy in the nuts.
Yeah, and then after we can get right back to fighting. Yeah,
exactly, and then we'll go back to fighting amongst each other like God intended.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what keeps them from being a major player in events much outside of their sphere of influence. Partially because they're too busy fighting each other, and partially because they don't really care.
Okay.
Economically, these guys are pretty much a laissez-faire, like uber capitalist state that like the government just hands off and let the buyer beware, essentially. As a result, they're pretty wealthy. And they certainly have a large abundance of trade goods, both incoming and outgoing. And it makes them pretty stable for the most part. Like, other than the whole Civil Wars thing, which really only happens at like the nobility level. Although occasionally, let's face it, if you're fighting in a city and you miss a shot, well, somebody's going to be losing a couple family members that day. Sue me.
Yeah.
My targeting computer wasn't working right. Sorry about that apartment block.
Oops. Yeah.
And that'll happen constantly. Is wherever mechs are fighting, I mean, most houses try not to have collateral damage, at least if they're fighting on their own territory. But, when you're dealing with 30-foot tall robots that are shooting missiles and shit at each other with questionable targeting computers at the best of times, like, what counts for like medium range in this game is like 300 meters. So we're at like,
Oh,
even by modern tech standards, very short range.
Yeah.
And these things are less. It's not like a Gundam is in the animes where they're very precise machines that are like sniping things and all that. This thing is essentially a walking tank, where
wow.
basically you take your reticle, put it over the enemy, and just pull the trigger and watch all the shiny lights go. And sometimes they go where they're meant to, and sometimes they don't. Now, the next guys we're going to get to don't really care, even about their own people. But, and they also have a constant feud with House Merrick, because there's one duchy on the border between Merrick and Liao space called Andurian that has been the site of more bloodshed and heartache than probably any other spot in the entire inner sphere. To the point where there are entire worlds there that have intentionally been left uncolonized, because they did have a population at one point, and it's now gone. And so they're almost cemetery worlds. In that, like, they have both, and that both sides have agreed to not colonize those planets as sort of a tombstone in the planet shape. That's how brutal some of these early wars were. And there's been constant border tension and stuff like that between House Liao and House Merrick for centuries. Some of these rivalries actually go back to before the Star League. So, like, we're talking about like the 2500s.
Okay, wow.
So these countries have been pissing each other off for like 6 centuries at this point.
Yeah.
So, there's not going to be a peaceful resolution to this.
It does sound very European.
Yes, it really does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And like I said, these guys, sometimes they get compared with America.
Okay.
Which I see and I kind of don't at the same time, because they're very multicultural. But they remind me more of like the Austro-Hungarian Empire than anything else. Just, competent.
Yeah.
Unlike Austria-Hungary.
Yeah.
Which, as a country, it was just like, how did you ever think that was going to work?
Magic.
Yeah, pretty much. Through the magic of script writing, it works this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving into the last of the great houses, and certainly the least, and everyone's least favorite, or most favorite to make fun of, we have the Capellan Confederation, otherwise known as House Liao, otherwise known as those commie sons of bitches from the Galactic
I was about to say, I saw the fist, I was like,
Yeah, these guys are not only basically space China, they are a brutal authoritarian police state.
Oh, wow.
Pretty much pictured like China, North Korea, and Soviet Russia all wrapped into one, and that's pretty much them. The only good news is that the chancellor, or as he likes to be known, his celestial wisdom, or their celestial wisdom, depending on who it is in charge, is usually batshit insane, and has absolute authority. So pretty much picture the imperial structure of like Han China,
okay,
with a modern authoritarian police state to back it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know how like there's that saying of like, the official Russian motto should be, and then things got worse. This is what worse looks like.
Oh yeah.
They are extremely inept for the most part, governmentally. Brutal beyond necessity. Like, they'll fuck over their own people just because they can.
Yeah.
When it comes to their treatment of mercenaries, you really don't want to piss these guys off, or if you do, you want to get out of town very, very quickly thereafter. Because pretty much everything looks like a sheath to them, and they're going to start trying to find a back to put their knife in. Whether it was actually your fault or not. It could just be like, his celestial wisdom had one of his days, so you all have to die.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those places.
Yeah.
That being said, the CCAF, despite not having any production facilities in their own territory for a mech of over 60 tons, so basically mediums and lighter, and being massively outnumbered, they're usually pretty good because they are not completely gone yet. They can, outside of the Fourth Succession War, where they get absolutely shit hammered by House Davion, just launching massive invasion wave after invasion wave. They actually hold their own for the most part, and that's like one of the few admirable things I have to say about House Liao is their military is actually fairly competent, and if they actually had the equipment they needed, might actually stand a chance against most other powers. As it is, though, most of their mechs are tiny and get steamrolled by much larger things like a Thunderbolt. And they're essentially the laughing stock of the Inner Sphere. And like I said, like a third of their territory disappears in 3028. So in later eras, they get to be quite large because they finally get a leader in Sun Tzu Liao who is not completely insane.
Say the name again, because that sounds so close to Sun Tzu.
That's because it is.
Yeah.
His name is Sun Tzu Liao.
Yeah. Okay. Right. All right. Okay. Just ripping that off. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yep.
I can't make the comparison of their logo, flag, whatever, of like 90% of the people are on the bottom, and then like top 10% or whatever.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Except it wouldn't be a tapered line. It would just be a flat bar and then one little thing sticking up at the top.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Where just like all communist systems, pretty much everyone sucks except leader.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when it comes down to their government style, you have no rights. When you're educated in the Capellan Confederation, I think it's like 16 or 17. They test you out for your suitability and loyalty to the state.
Oh, wow.
And if you fail that test, you have exactly one more chance. And if you don't, you become what is called a state servitor. No, not the 40K servitor.
Yeah.
Mercifully.
Yeah. I'm just picturing the stuff from Fallout where just like who's in charge, like the overseer. Just like,
it's pretty much like that. But even for the guys who are trusted enough to be given positions within the government, or basically have any political power, or any power in the military, like whether it be a mech warrior or anybody else, you're still being watched 24/7. And if you say or do anything that might upset the secret police, otherwise known as the Maskarovka, you're dead. They're exactly like Stalinist Russia in that.
Right. Yeah.
So overall governance, not great. Paranoid beyond belief.
Yeah.
Really brutal to their own people and others. And generally nothing redeeming about it. Other than the fact that they've done just well enough that they're not dead yet.
That's something, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. And they're also the youngest of the successor states. They were created last.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's a lot of real world comparisons, aren't there?
Yeah. Well, I say they were created last, but they were still created in like the 2400s.
Okay, yeah.
So
I mean, like everything else so far has been these like old monarchies that go way back, and this is kind of pretty recent.
The fun part with most of those is some of them didn't start out as monarchies.
Okay.
Like House Davion started, or the Federated Sons start out as a literal federation, quite similar to the modern United States or European Union.
Okay.
And then basically throughout, after the Davion Civil War, essentially the first prince ended up being the end-all be-all of the Davion government. And just like House Steiner, they actually take that duty pretty seriously and see it as a responsibility to their people and not just, I have absolute power, look what I can do. So, which it actually usually works out pretty well for House Davion or for the Federated Sons. And the Davions are typically pretty civically minded. Meanwhile, to put it in terms that Professor Tex used in his video on this, which you should absolutely go watch, there's no guarantee. It's like, your average Capellan leader might struggle with concepts like object permanence and may or may not be able to tell the difference between warfare and entertainment. So, yeah. Overall, not a great place, especially if you're a mercenary, because then they have no loyalty to you.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, even if you're a CCAF officer, they'll still shoot you. They just might feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And then we move into the real fun one. The smallest power in terms of territory held, and yet one of the most influential and probably the most actually powerful in terms of ability to project it. We have the phone company, Comstar. And I'm not really kidding. These guys are essentially pretty much if you combined Comcast, the CIA, and JP Morgan.
Okay.
And gave them Earth.
Wait, they control Earth?
Yes, they control Terra. It's the only planet they control. But they're also in charge of all interstellar communications through the hyperpulse generator network. Basically, they're the remnants of what was the Starleague Communications Bureau, who used to run the HPGs. And then when Starleague fell apart, the last guy who ran SL ComNet, Jerome Blake, basically started Comstar as a caretaker for the HPG network and to kind of safeguard technology, almost like the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout.
Okay, yeah.
And over time, it turned into a weird quasi-religious order of space techno wizards, robes and everything.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they're kind of like Earth's version of the Mechanicus, sort of. Yeah. Okay.
And when I say like the CIA, like these guys know everything, because if it ever touched interstellar communication, like an HPG transmission or whatever, they know it because it all goes through them. Which has led to some real conspiracy theories on, and it's been hinted at, and also they've been caught a couple of times of Comstar basically trying to keep everyone else's technological level at or below where they're currently at.
Okay. Yeah.
Like basically they'll try to collect like data cores and stuff like that might contain information on technical documents on how to do things like double heat sinks or endosteel or something along those lines. And if they can't take it, they'll destroy it rather than have it fall into the hands of the successor states, because they believe only they can be trusted with it. So just like the Brotherhood of Steel.
Also, I assume they also information brokers.
No, not really. They don't. Well, they are and they aren't. They'll selectively pass information to certain parties or to one house or another, but only insofar as it benefits Comstar and furthers their goal. So it's less like the Shadow Broker for Mass Effect, where he doesn't care about politics. All he cares about is the great game. This is kind of the opposite, where they're playing everyone against each other, but they also have their own agenda. To the point where during the Fourth Succession War, these guys tried to sabotage the Federated Sons by cutting off all of their access to the HPG network. So as a result, the Fed Sons had to start relying on courier services and things like that, which slowed things down. But First Prince Hans Davion had actually anticipated that move and kind of did away with it. And at this point in history, no one knows it yet, but Comstar has an absolutely massive army called the Comguard that are all Star League era mechs. So these guys have all the advanced tech, including some variants of mechs like the Lancelot and the Thug that are very rare in the rest of the Inner Sphere, if not completely unknown. So these guys are the closest thing to the Star League that exists in the Inner Sphere. And basically, they're treated almost like a combination of like Comcast and the World Economic Forum in terms of their sinister intent, but never openly.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a very interesting group of people. And you don't ever talk bad about Comstar, or you might just suffer a drive failure on your next jump.
Yeah.
It's happened.
Okay.
Yeah, they're that faction.
You're right.
Of like, it's like you have like your Alex Jones moment of,
yeah.
Oh, Comstar did this and that, and they're looking at the globalists, and I mean, Comstar is your friend.
Yeah. Exactly.
My captors have informed me that Comstar is not, in fact, responsible for any of this, and, and any claims to the contrary, which would be slander. But yeah, no, that they're an interesting addition into the setting because, yeah, the other houses are all trying to screw each other over in a lot of ways, and trying to basically, because how the succession wars start is essentially the Star League was an alliance of all of the houses plus the now defunct Terran hegemony, all coming together under one single government, almost like the United Nations, except not really, because there was one family in charge of it all to kind of unify all human territory and kind of put the kibosh on interspecies warfare.
Okay.
And for a couple hundred years, it worked pretty well, with some major exceptions. And ruling the whole Star League were the hereditary heads of the Terran hegemony, House Cameron. But long story short, eventually, a lot of the periphery states had a very large grudge against the Star League because they did not join willingly. They were kind of like, you're going to be friends with us now, or else.
Right. Okay.
So one of those periphery realms, the Rimworld's Republic, led by a fat Genghis Khan-looking asshole named Stefan Amaris. And I'm not kidding. He literally looks like a fat Genghis Khan.
Okay.
Fucking hilarious.
I'm just picturing Jagatai Khan.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty much pictured that, except not competent.
Right. Okay.
Or cool. Well, he is actually pretty devious at first, because he basically, the last head of the Star League, Richard Cameron, he takes over as First Lord when he's 8 years old because his parents die suddenly. In a totally not an act, or in a totally not a political assassination. It was totally an industrial accident.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No one should ever think otherwise. But anyway, Stefan Amaris basically manipulates this kid from the time he's very young, alongside his actual regent, who is a name that will become one of the most recognized in all of Battletech, Star League Defense Force General by the name of Alexander Kerensky. And Kerensky was basically straight up and down duty-bound Star League through and through. Whereas Ameris was a yes man. Basically would ingratiate himself to Richard in any way he knew how. Basically give him all sorts of gifts, kind of schmooze his way into his confidence. Used that to basically manipulate Richard into doing some rather unpopular things that started a lot of tension within the Star League and also in the periphery. And then, through some more political machinations, basically managed to get most of the Star League Defense Force to be redeployed to the periphery to put down the uprisings out there, and used that. And you can abandon those garrisons. I'll have my men man the fort while you're away. You can tell where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
And the scene is perfect too, because it's absolutely beautiful. On I think Christmas Day. No, sorry, no, it's not Christmas Day. It's Richard Cameron's birthday. This guy who has been, sucking up to Richard Cameron for so long that Cameron basically allows him unfettered access to the royal palace, has taught him about all the defenses, all that kind of stuff, is allowed around him with no guards or anything. So he brings a nice wrapped present for the First Lord on his birthday. And, almost the entire Cameron family is in the throne room at this point to, celebrate his birthday and all that. So he presents his present to Richard and holds up a very ornate, very jeweled and enameled, blinged out laser pistol. Lets him look at it, lets him admire it a long time, and then levels it at his head and blows his goddamn head off.
Oh.
Yeah. So pretty much he launches a coup that kills off all of House Cameron.
Right.
In 1 minute, or in one fell swoop. Starts a massive fucking war. Royally pisses off the Royal Black Watch, which is a very bad move. Because they're a bunch of angry Scotsmen in battle mechs, and it takes multiple nuclear weapons to finally put them down. And yes, I mean multiple.
Yeah.
Because nukes are merely inconvenient.
Mm-hmm.
And the next decade is basically spent with the SLDF hate fucking their way through the periphery, absolutely destroying the Rimworld's Republic. And then I think just the battle for Terra itself lasts over 2 years of just grueling, nonstop attrition combat.
Okay.
And at the end of it, basically, there isn't much of a Star League left standing. And of course, just like in Game of Thrones, really, now that House Cameron is gone, a new family needs to become the First Lords of the Star League. And every one of the great houses kind of looks at each other and just, why not me? And then proceed to start hate banging the shit out of each other for the next 300 years or so to try to answer that question of who's going to be the next Lord of the Star League. And yeah, that's how we end up where we are in 3025, where nothing's changed. All of them still claim the throne.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those And the worst part about the lore of Battletech, or in terms of depressing, is it's easily believable that this would be the case.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's oh yeah.
It mirrors a lot of older European history.
Yeah, it's not even stuff that could happen in the future. It's it's stuff that already has.
Yeah.
Repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at you, Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Especially what was it, the year of the four emperors, where basically 3 of them were so incompetent that within a month or two that one of them quit. He just got overwhelmed by being the emperor and quit. The other 2 were stabbed to death by the Praetorian Guard, which is hilarious. Because that was a thing in ancient Rome as well. If you pissed off the Praetorians, you'd be dead and there would be a new emperor.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I think the fourth one was Nero.
Oh,
So yeah.
right.
So not incompetent, also not good.
No, not good.
So that was, and it's kind of the same vein of, as soon as there's a power vacuum, everyone goes, well, my butt fits in that chair. Why not me?
Mm-hmm.
And then the knives come out.
Yeah.
And the whole thing gets rather bloody rather fast. But as to the designs, I mean, to the mechs themselves, you have all sorts of different types of designs, from, things like the catapult, which are basically a pair of massive missile launchers and legs. You have absolute brutes like this thing, the Awesome, which is literally just slabs of armor and then 3 particle cannons.
Huh.
And a big meaty battle fist, just cuz. And they're all designed for different things too. Some are designed for fire support. Some are designed, like the Awesome, to just be a frontline brawler and just be able to take punishment in the mass quantities. And others are designed to kind of be a jack of all trades. Things like the Centurion or the Enforcer, they're kind of designed as just generic troopers. They can kind of do most jobs pretty well, but they're not specialized at any one thing. Same with my favorite mech of this period and second favorite mech of all time, the Warhammer. It's a 70-ton monstrosity that is pretty much designed around medium to long-range combat.
Okay.
And has been in constant production since 2515.
Wow.
Which is why there's so goddamn many of them. Like there are certain mechs that are more common than others. Like I think the most common is the Stinger, which is a little. Actually, I think I have one. Yeah, I do. It's a little 20-ton scout mech. They're basically like the Honda Civic of mechs, where like they're not great. They do the job okay, and there's a million of them. So it's available.
Yeah, fair enough.
And at this point in history, given how scarce mechs actually are, it's less, oh, this thing's perfectly suited for this job, of we have one, so we're using it. Sometimes it's great for that role. Sometimes it's just the thing I had. And like I said, the heavier the mechs get tends to be the less common they are. The Atlas is still fairly common because of how many of them stayed after the Exodus, which is a whole another story. But there's also a ton of them produced. Oh, hey, we have a new guy here, Ken Latchy. What's going on, man? We are going to get more into Wolf's Dragoons in a future episode. This was just kind of a primer on the Inner Sphere circa 3025. I'm a big fan of Wolf's Dragoons and their lore. Especially some of their novels, like Wolves on the Border. It's one of the best Battletech novels by far. And even if you don't like them, they're still a pretty cool faction.
Yeah, what's the Wolf's Dragoons?
The Wolf's Dragoons are a mercenary unit that showed up out of the deep periphery in 3009 with some very advanced mechs, and have worked since for every major house. And they're one of the most effective merc units in the entire Inner Sphere, and they have some designs that were basically lost. So like no one knows where they came from. Everyone assumes that they found a cache of old Star League mechs. You find out a lot more about them in 3050, though. So I won't spoil that because that's a really fun reveal. But yeah, they're a really cool mech unit. They're a little bit different than, say, the Kellhounds or the Ardani Light Horse or something like that. So we'll have an episode on Battletech at some point that goes into the big mercenary units, especially because I play as a merc too. So It's always fun to either talk up or talk shit about my competition, as the case may be.
Yeah.
But no, with that, I mean, we've pretty much exhausted that, the great houses and stuff like that. If you guys have any questions, sure. If you put them in the chat or whatever, or if you two have any questions about the setting.
No further questions.
Okay.
I've just been soaking all this in. It is a lot. Like,
yeah, and I've barely scratched the surface.
Okay, yeah.
On what there is.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you could do a 2-hour lore video on each one of these factions.
Mm-hmm.
One question: what are the basic types of mechs?
All right, so you have 4 different classes of mechs, basically. You have your lights, which are from 20 to 35 tons. You have your mediums, which are from 40 to 55 tons. You have heavies, which are from 60 to 75 tons. And then you have your assaults, the big boys, which go from 80 to 100 tons. They're big. They're very big. Also, there's a lot of speculation that a Star League ton is not what we would call a ton, because some of these things should weigh a lot more than that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But no, they're really cool, and I want to get into like the workings of how a battle mech works and all that, but that will be for a future episode, because I know you guys probably have to go. I know I do too, because I have a brand new puppy, so
yeah,
sleep is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for coming by. Thank all you guys in chat for being here. Boosh, I know you were here a while ago. Ian, so forth. I'm glad to see you here. Ken, welcome to it. Vince, Elf, all you guys. It's been great. And like I said, I finally got the chance to talk about my favorite nerd shit on stream.
There you go. Yeah.
And next episode of one of these, I think I am going to do Star Trek.
Oh, okay. I might have to be there for that one.
Yeah, especially you being a newer fan.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because Trek I may love Battletech more than any of the others, but Trek will always be my first fandom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I actually talked to Jonathan Frakes about this when I met him at Fan Expo last year. I got a signed picture for my dad.
Yeah, I'm still jealous
because he was actually at the first convention I ever went to in like 1993.
Oh, wow.
When I was like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Same year, my oldest brother.
So he thought that was really cool that like I was still coming to conventions like 25 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that is amazing.
Because I remember it had to be like actually probably 91 or 92 because TNG was still on the air when we went to that. So that was really cool. But yeah, that's how long I've been a fan of Star Trek. Is I remember watching TNG when it originally aired with my dad every Saturday night.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll get into that on the next one, and man, is it going to be fun because it's Star Trek.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Fizz, what do you got coming up?
Not much. I'm trying to build up my subscribe star right now with some short stories going to be releasing, which they're probably going to suck because my poor writing quality. But I'm trying to build my subscribe star so I can build up to release of a fan webcomic based on the Mask character.
Oh wow!
Excellent. And then Phil, I'm assuming you're up to your usual shenanigans on Twitter with the Legion of Memers.
Yeah, pretty much. I haven't been memeing as much lately, but I'm trying to get back into it. Yeah, so
excellent.
You can find me there.
And I think you're Commander Phil over on Twitter as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing.
So go check him out. Some of his memes are fucking hilarious.
Thank you.
And or just really well timed.
Yeah.
I remember. Was it right when Elon bought Twitter? Like you had the one of all of our icons, and then the spirit bomb with Elon Musk as Goku.
That might have been Scully or whatever his name is now. I could be wrong. Anyway, yeah, that one was really good.
Yeah, that one
Yeah.
still makes me giggle from time to time.
There's ones that definitely stick out.
Yeah. And then as for me, you can catch me every Thursday on here. I try to do either rock and roll history or another random fandom. It'll probably alternate between weeks. If my schedule allows it. I just started a new job, so don't know if I'll be able to do weekdays anymore, but we'll see. And other than that, you can find me every Sunday for our weekly show, Rock and Roll Religion, where I break down some of my favorite bands and just bands I think are extremely important to talk about. And, just go into their history, some of the albums, and, recommendations on whether or not I think they're worth your time. And if I'm bringing them up on stream, they're probably worth your time because there's a lot of things out there I don't talk about. But other than that, I hope you guys will keep tuning in for these. I really like doing them. And hopefully you guys like listening to them. So with that all being said, take care, stay safe. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.
Yeah. See ya.